Morning. Good morning. Can you confirm you can hear me?
Confirm, I can hear you, sir.
Yes.
Yes, boss, I can hear you.
Good morning.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. It's been a while. Okay, so depending on what part of the world you are joining from, I guess it's safe to say not just good morning, but rather good day. And I take it that we are all doing okay. It's our first knowledge sharing session for the year 2025. And this morning we are exploring mastering Linux and Unix security, right? In today's digital landscape, Linux and Unix-based servers form the backbone of countless enterprise IT operations, right? It's estimated to that a significant percentage, right, of enterprise servers are running on Linux or Unix operating systems. In fact, there are people who put that number at, say, 70%, right? And so you have this running on, say, your web hosting services, your databases, your cloud infrastructure, just name it. Now, while its widespread adoption of is a testament to its stability, right? And that's why most enterprises use it for running their core operations. It has also become a prime target for malicious actors, right? And so they are not immune to some of the issues that we have with our most famous operating system. So from issues around misconfiguration to outdated software to privilege escalation, insider threats, just name it. These vulnerabilities highlight the need for us to have robust security practices, system hardening, adhering to standards, proactive threat mitigation, right? So our faculty this morning is, I'll call him one of our industry's finest, right? His name is Chinonso Ezeji. He leads the emerging technology assurance function in one of the tier 1 banks in Nigeria. He has had an interesting career. It will shock you to know that he is a chartered accountant. He's a CISA. He's the only certified cloud security engineer that I know, right, among several other certifications that he possesses. He's a testament to the fact that, look, anything you set your heart to, you can achieve. But before I hand over to Nonso, let me provide a bit of background how we will run, right? So he'll briefly introduce Linux operating system. We'll discuss common risk institutions face and then their mitigants. Then we'll delve into the lab session where he will show us a couple of misconfigurations that you could find. And then we'll spend the last 10 minutes taking questions and on to wrap up. I'll encourage us to be attentive, right? This is a Linux operating system course is typically 4-5 days. We're cramping that up into 1 hour, but don't let that phase you. The recordings will be available, will as much as possible give you what you require, that by next week, you should be able to enter your organization and carry out a security assessment of your Linux environment. All right? Okay, so Nonso, over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Can you confirm I'm audible?
Sure. Loud and clear.
All right, so I'll be sharing my screen. Let me know where you can see my screen.
Yes, you're up.
All right, okay. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon if you're outside Nigeria. Well, welcome to this session. Now, I know that Mr. T, I call him Mr. T, he has given a background, about my person. But I just like to I just like to call myself Nonso. And like you said, I'm a chartered accountant, and I am a testament to the fact that whatever you set your mind on is actually very possible, right? When I go for reviews in institutions and we talk about Linux or Unix operating system, that's non-conventional Windows operating system, there's this little bit of jitter fear, amongst the people around. But like I'll always say, there's really nothing hard about it, right? It just requires you putting in the required effort, right? Putting in the required effort to master, the commands and being able to interpret it, right? And you're home and dry. Without wasting much time, I'll be taking us through Linux, right? Linux, Unix security, your non-Windows operating system, right? And for institutions, we usually have for our Windows servers, we have what we call Active Directory. Now through the AD, you're able to configure all Windows servers, right? Through which that the AD controls, right? But on Linux and Unix systems, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. Reason being that for some institutions that I have been opportune to review, there is no central system to which these Linux boxes are configured uniformly. So what happens is you see the sysadmin staff or the IT staff, they log in one after the other into these Linux boxes, to configure them. And with that, most times, some of the things we see on the field is you see maybe, for instance, an organization has 8 servers, you see 2 Linux boxes configured properly, and the remaining 6, not even configured at all, right? And this is some of the issues we see because you don't have, there is no common centralized management system to uniformly configure these Linux boxes across the enterprise, right? So building on that, what is a Linux operating system, right? So usually I call it is an open source Unix-based system, right? If the history of how Linux was created was by Linus Torvalds in 1991, he was just building on what existed already, which is the Unix operating system. And that is why you hear people say Unix is closed-based, right? It's a proprietary system. But for Linux, Linux is open source based because it's building on what the Unix already have. We're going to be talking about the differences subsequently. But before I proceed, I'll just want to lay emphasis on some of the components or one of the components of a Linux operating system, which we're going to be seeing in the lab, and that is the kernel. Right now, the kernel is the base component of the OS, like it says. It is very, very important. There's an example I always like giving when it comes to talking about the kernel. Now, I used to say, think of a Linux system like a restaurant, for instance, right? Now, the hardware is the kitchen where the food is actually prepared, right? The kernel is the head chef, right? What he does is to manage orders, make sure the kitchen runs efficiently. Now, the operating system itself is the entire restaurant. Please, can you confirm if I'm still audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So the kernel, like I said, is the head chef managing the orders and making sure that the kitchen runs efficiently. Now, the operating system is the entire restaurant, including the waiters, the menus, the cash register. Then the applications are the customers that are now placing orders. Now, how does the Linux system works? Now, a customer, which we have said is an application, right? He comes in, he orders a meal. Now, on the operating system, see it like requesting a resource, more like opening a file. Now, the waiter, which is like a system utility, now takes the order and hands it over to the head chef, which I already said the head chef is the kernel, right? Now, what the head chef does is to coordinate the kitchen, which is the hardware, to prepare the meal, execute the request. So whenever you're opening a file, what handles that request is the kernel. So that's why it's seen as the base component. It's like a mediator between your operating system and the hardware, right? Now, when the head chef coordinates the kitchen to prepare the meal and execute the request, the food is ready, right? Now, the waiter brings it to the customer, serves it to the customer, right? Now, without the head chef, which is the kernel, there is even a high chance that the kitchen won't know what to do. So you can have a beautiful OS, the restaurant, very beautiful, right? But if the people in the kitchen don't have someone who guides, which is the kernel, someone who manages the operation, you're just having a beautiful restaurant. So that's what the kernel does. It just ensures smooth communication, resource management, just like the chef will ensure that the food is cooked and delivered correctly. So we're going to be sharing the slides where you can read thoroughly more about the system user space that speaks to daemons. So we see daemons are background processes like your cron, or your command line interfaces, applications like your package manager. So we're going to be sharing the slides. So we'll read up, but we're going to be demonstrating this in the lab. Now, what's the basic difference between a Linux and a Unix operating system? The origin. Unix dates back to 1970. Linux was created in 1991 based on the Unix system. Now, source code, like I said, Unix is proprietary, it's closed-based, while Linux is open source-based. Now, because it is closed source-based, what you have on the Unix is it's quite difficult to customize, right? It's limited in customization and flexibility. While on your Linux side, because it's open source, is highly customizable. I was having a conversation with a friend recently, is somewhere outside, and it was like whenever they want to spin up a server and they have they're trying to decide on which OS. Everybody's always Linux. Let's use Linux operating system. Let's use Unix. And the question is always why, right? So everybody thinks that the Linux Unix operating system is stable and secure, right? Which is good. But like Mr. T said during the introduction, right? There are some issues, right? There are some issues that expose this system. Although they are stable and secure, things like a modular architecture, such that you can have, if you make a changes to an SSH config, for instance, you can independently restart the SSH service without affecting other service. Very good. Linux, long uptime without reboots, very good, right? But these systems are not totally immune. We're going to be looking at, as the class progresses, we're going to be looking at the case scenario of a hack which happened, right, and affected Linux servers. That shows us that although, right, they're stable and secure, we still need to harden them within our enterprise and our institution. So moving on, I'll be looking at the Linux distributions. Because they are open source, Linux are open source, you have tons of Linux distros. You have Ubuntu, Fedora, Red Hat. Red Hat, they are commercial enterprise Linux systems now. You have Red Hat, you have SUSE, you have Arc, you have CentOS, you have Debian, you have Kali for security and other Linux distributions. Now, so a very striking difference between these distros are the syntax, right? sometimes. So on a Red Hat, for instance, if you want to install a package, right, for the newer Red Hat versions, you can be running maybe a sudo DNF. If it's an older version, a sudo yum install blah 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 the package. Now, if it's an Ubuntu, you'll be doing a sudo apt. So it's just some syntax difference between these distros, but some of the commands I can tell you run on these distributions. Please, if I'm running fast, you can let me know. So how does Windows differentiate from a Linux operating system?
Hey, Siri, take a screenshot.
Okay, how does Windows differentiate from a Linux operating system? Right, now I'm going to be speaking through some of the differences. Now, in terms of source code, Windows is proprietary. It's a proprietary system. Linux, like I've said from the point of beginning, it's open source. It's an open source code. In terms of efficiency, Windows OS is less efficient because of how rich it is. You're talking about it has many built-in services, graphical interfaces, background processes, and compatibility layers, right, to support a wide range of hardware and software. That's what you have on the Windows operating system. But Linux are lightweight, and they have fewer complexities that compared to your Windows system, right? In terms of software, Linux, extensive open source software, while Windows, you have a range of commercial software that you have to pay for. Now, in terms of file naming convention, this is something that is very important, right? On a Windows system, file names are not case sensitive. I'll be showing us that during the lab. But on a Linux system, file names are case sensitive. So you want to write, you set up a user add, using your root account, you say user add nonso, and you start n in an uppercase, right? If I'm trying to check maybe the ID, the groups where nonso belongs, and I run maybe ID and I put n in small, right, in a lowercase, nonso, it's going to return, it's not going to run, right? So they are case sensitive in Linux. Every file, everything you're running in Linux is case sensitive. Now, in terms of filing system, right, in Windows, you have different compartments, disk drives, drive C, drive D, drive E, and if you want to use a simple PowerShell, maybe to pick up a file from a particular drive, what you'll be seeing is C:// program files / blah, 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 blah. And so you have, but on a Linux operating system, files are arranged in a tree-like hierarchy, right? It's in a tree-like hierarchy. So everything is from the root directory. And the path separator on a Linux-based operating system is /. But on a Windows operating system, what you have is a / C drive, / program files, / the file you want to select and all that. So those are some of the differences. There are other differences between Windows and a Linux operating system. Now, moving on, I want to talk to us about the Sony Pictures hack of 2014. Now, as of November 2014, right, there was a group called Guardian of Peace. That's what they were popularly called then, and they took over Sony's network and displayed a threatening message on employee computers. Now, some people believe that it was a response to a movie they were releasing then. I think it's the interview about North Korea, something about North Korea in the movie. That's what some school of thought had, that, oh, this attack was in response to that movie that they were going to release, right? But some cybersecurity firms were able to look at, what actually happened on this, concerning this hack. Cybersecurity firms like Kaspersky, Symantec, FireEye. So they analyzed and they were able to come up with the fact that, oh, there was a malware called Destova, which was used to exfiltrate data from Sony's computers. And the malware affected both Windows and Linux servers. Now, whenever I read about a hack, I try to look at what other school of thoughts are saying. The experts, what are they saying that should have been done, to help pick out this issue early or to prevent this issue from happening, right? When I looked at some of the cybersecurity experts, some of these firms, some individuals too, they said, the reason why this issue or the reason why this hack actually happened, some came up with the fact that, there was a lack of endpoint detection response, EDR, that made it difficult to stop the malware. Some school of thoughts also came up with the fact that even though there was no EDR, right? If you look at the security configuration of a Linux box from Sony, you would see that most of them retained their default configuration. The password complexity was not implemented. So if you look at, you'll see that the last part, they said large amount of sensitive data were extracted. Aside the employee mails, internal security credentials to very easy credentials were sniffed from their systems. So some school of thoughts came up with the fact that, their Linux boxes were running outdated software that was also vulnerable to exploitation. So if you read about the story, you'll see tons of cybersecurity experts with their own, after analyzing the case, they came up with issues that went wrong with their Linux configurations. And over here in Nigeria, institutions that I have visited to review, see that we have common cases like that. There are common cases like that. Issues around configuration, right? Is in the next slide. Okay, let me go through that. So yeah, so some common security flaws that have been observed while conducting this review. First and foremost, I would like to start with governance, right? Now, there are many institutions today that do not have a standardized hardening policy for their Linux operating systems. Now, what this causes is the fact that you don't have a disciplined approach on how these boxes are configured. So I get into an environment to review, and the first thing I'm asking is, okay, you want me to look at these servers, fine. Do you have a hardening policy? How these servers ought to be configured, right? The reason I ask for this is because whatever review I am conducting on these servers has to be benchmarked with that governance policy, the hardening standard or governance document for a Linux-based operating systems. Now, if they don't have it, what usually occur, or what I usually see on sites is you have a misalignment in the configuration. Box A is saying password is 10 characters. Box 2, a second Linux server is saying password is 6 characters. Box 3 is saying password has been configured to accept password at 4 characters, right? So the governance document is like a guardrail, right, on how these boxes are to be configured, such that when anybody deviates from what has been decided, right, in that document or what has been documented, right, it becomes a policy violation and you can easily deal, right? We don't want a situation wherein in an enterprise, everybody is bringing best practice. And best practice, what I've learned over time is best practice from Mr. A might differ from best practice from Mr. B. But we should be governed on how these servers are to be configured. So secondly, what I usually see is absence of centralized management, right? Because for Windows system, you see things like Active Directory, you can easily manage configurations across all your Windows servers. And for Linux systems, it is rare before you see. It is rare before you see a centralized managed solution. So the issue of going one after the other, and you can see, just like Mr. T said during the introduction, most organizations now turn to Linux to host some resources. And you can go into an organization and see as many as 10, 15 Linux servers, right? Now, having to log in one after the other, sometimes we are humans, we are prone to errors. So you see sometimes some people will miss one server and that server would not be configured. And all it takes to get into a system is just one, just need one opening to be able to get into a system. So those are some of the things we see on the field. The issue of default configurations. There's this scare for Linux servers, and most times once the servers just come, what you see is people just plug it, push it live, use the root account, and be carrying out their day-to-day task. Nobody wants to bother itself the way the Linux box is configured. Do we have settings that do not match our governance documents? We've said we're not going to use telnet. Nobody goes as far to even checking whether telnet is actually enabled, on those boxes. So everything, the way it comes is the way it's plugged in, and the resources just starts going to that particular server. The next thing we have is knowledge gap, right? So there's this limited expertise on Linux, Unix, on non-Windows operating systems among IT and security staff. And if the people that are supposed to administer and secure the systems have limited knowledge, how then can we proceed? It becomes an issue, right? So you're asking some very questions about, okay, let me give an instance. You go into an environment and you will see users who have exited an institution for over 760 something days, almost 2 years. Their access, their profile is still active on these Linux servers, not disabled, right? Not disabled, And when you ask some questions, you hear things like, it's not linked to the AD. Okay, because it's not linked to the AD, does it mean that exited users should still remain active on the Linux servers? Right. So these are some of the things we see on the field. Absence of security solutions, just like the Sony issue, right? Where some school of thoughts where, oh, you don't have any EDR, no antivirus, no advanced threat detection on these servers. That is why, that malware was able to run on that particular server. So critical security tools like your antivirus, your endpoint protection, they're not typically installed on these servers. And some of these organizations will tell you that, oh yes, we have antivirus on our servers, but when you run certain commands, a systemctl to list all the running services, you will see that you can't even see, whether a DS agent, a deep security agent, Trend Micro, or any of the EDR, you can't even find them on these servers. Some of the things we find. Inactive accounts, I already spoke about that. Exited employees remaining active on the system. Improper privilege management. So you see things like regular users having pseudo privileges, right? Because organizations don't know how to use pseudo groups, right, on these boxes, they just begin to open the sudo as config file and start adding these users one after the other, just adding them, allowing them to run all commands, right? There is a group that Linux has, right? Depending on your distro, for an Oracle or a Red Hat, for instance, when you open your sudo as config file, which we'll see, you'll see there's a group called Wheel, WHEEL, right, that has been created such that if nonso is an admin and you want nonso to have sudo privilege to perform elevated tasks, why don't you add nonso and every other person to the Wheel group? You add them to the Wheel group, configure the group such that it will require a password whenever you want to perform or whenever you want to invoke that sudo super user do. It should require a password, But most times you don't see that. You just see them, they go on the sudo file, just be adding add this guy, add this guy, add this guy. And you see like 11 users added one after the other, on the sudo as file. So those are some of the things. We also see things like root account being used for your day-to-day task. You tell someone, okay, log on and help me do this. And the person is logging on with a root account directly, root through SSH. He uses PuTTY, putting the IP, hits enter, login as root, putting the password. An individual has your root account password and is able to log in to perform his day-to-day task. So these are some of the security flaws we observed. Please let me not be like I'm speaking. Are we together? Can we?
Yeah, we're with you.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you. Now, what are some of the mitigation strategies? What are some of the strategies we can enforce to be able to deal with these issues that we've identified? So whenever I leave, most of my reviews, my recommendations are usually along the line of developing a Linux server hardening standard or policy, right? That defines at least the minimum baseline that should be expected to be configured on these servers, right? We have industry benchmarks that can assist CIS, Center for Internet Security, and NIST. Organizations can reference, benchmarks from these bodies, to build up the hardening standard for their environments. Now, when I say reference, I don't mean they copy paste. No, you should be able to look at what the CIS benchmark has said, NIST has said, be able to look at your own environment because configurations differ across environments, right? There are organizations I've met that allow root accounts to log on to these servers, but they use a privilege access management solution to manage that root account on Linux servers. That is different. But you can see organization B that doesn't have any PAM solution. That's a privilege access management solution. So everybody just carry your roots and log into the account and let's do what we need to do. As long as it's up and running, that is important. So the configurations has to reflect your environment. What is your environment saying about certain things, right? Let's fix that in. So we can reference these best practices from NIS and NIST and CIS rather to build up a hardening standard. We can use configuration management tools, right? Although some of these tools are being used by other countries outside Ansible, to ensure consistent security settings across your Linux servers is something that organizations should explore because most of our critical applications for organizations I've visited, most of their critical applications are being hosted on Linux servers, and we can't afford to make the mistake of having 10, 15 Linux servers and we're doing it manually. There could be errors, there could be oversight. At that point, what happens, right? So we should explore the use of configuration management tools to ensure uniform settings across our servers. Let's disable unused services and look at our default accounts, right? Some organization, okay, it's only one organization I've visited rather, and they had to disable their root account. Right? And everybody, you want to go in. Are you an admin person? If you're not an admin person, right, you're going into your regular user. What you can perform is limited. But as an administrator, you use the sudo to actually perform elevated actions on the server. Conduct regular training on Linux security administration. Right. This is a KSS that is limited. We're trying to compress as much as possible. So we might not be able to dig deep, but you can look for trainings that staff can get involved in, right? Regular trainings on Linux security administration, right? Focusing on hardening and access control. Then install compatible security tools like Trend Micro, which is your deep security agents, your CrowdStrike, Falcon, Sentinel, whatever security solution that is compatible with your Linux environment, explore the use because they are stable and secure. does not mean that we should forego the need for an EDR on our systems. It becomes important. SIEM agents on your server, these are very important solutions, security solutions. Have your file integrity monitoring and your SIEM agents on your server to aid in terms of investigation for your SIEM, file integrity monitoring, any sensitive files, right? If someone is able to access, you should be able to get an alert from your SIEM. Now, restrict your sudo privileges to only the required users. Follow the principle of least privilege. Use the group that has been defined to assign sudo privileges to users. Require a password. Configure it such that you require a password to perform that sudo elevated act. You see, someone goes in and he wants to open an SSHD config. So he writes sudo space cat space /etc/ssh/sshd_config, and he hits enter and he opens. No, bearing in mind that, so let me tell you, this is a true life story. So upon review, if you look at your SSHD config, the login grace time is 2 minutes, right? It allows you, so as long as I'm logged in, before it signs out, before it times out, right? 2 minutes. The session was active. And somebody did sudo blah, 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 and he hit enter and he went, He minimized the screen. During review, I was like, okay, go back to your screen, right? You go back to your screen. You could type sudo xxx and hit enter. It could go. No. Right? Because when you open the Linux box, I'll show this, and you do, let's say I log in as Uncle Nonso on the server, and I type who am I, you will see that it will return Uncle Nonso. But if I type sudo who am I, the return is root, because at that point, you're not just Nonso again. There is something attached to Nonso that gives him an elevated privilege. So when you give someone the access to perform any act with sudo, he becomes root. And at that point, we need to control the use of the word sudo or the power sudo, right? So these are some of the mitigation strategies we can use. Now, in a user profile in Linux, right, it's usually configured in such a way that the root account has a user ID and group ID of 0. System accounts range from 1 to 999. That's both as user ID and group ID. While regular users have user IDs and group IDs starting from 1,000 below. This is an example which we are going to run through on the lab. So at this point, I would stop sharing my screen so I could log on to my the server so we can demonstrate some of these things. I have some commands here. Because of time, we're going to be looking at some commands and explain, some of the things that we should look out for based on the whole explanation that has started from the beginning point of this exercise, or this KSS rather. Please, can we give a 1, 2, 3 in the chat box if we are to get that? Okay, I see it. Okay, so give me some minutes. Let me try and log in. Let's see. Okay. All right. Please let me see. my screen. Can you see my screen? Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to be referencing some of the commands I've exported to actually show us some of the things that we've talked about. So I'm logged into this test server as Okuno. So if I do a simple, who am I? You will see I am Okuno. Now, if I do a simple sudo who am I, you see it's root, right? So who am I? Okuno. So sudo who am I? Root. You will see that this particular server has been configured such that I am able to execute sudo without a request for a password, right? Now, these are some of the things we're going to be looking out for. Now, as a tech assurance expert or a tech risk practitioner, the first thing I will always want to look out for when I get into a Linux server or a Linux box or a Unix server is to first look at what is the version, right? What is the version? Is the version still in support? So if I do a simple cat etc/os-release, right, it's going to give me, and by the way, we're going to share, these commands they're not limited. We're going to build on something and actually share in the group, right? So if I run a simple cat, that's concatenate, right, to show, and etc. So etc is a directory that shows, it's a directory that holds all system-wide configuration files, right? So as auditors, we're interested in, oh, let me see the configurations that's been set for this operating system, right? So when I concatenate to show me in the system-wide file, OS release, right? So the etc directory holds a file called OS release that gives you details about your Oracle Linux server in this case. So if you typically, as a tech practitioner, you want to go online to check whether maybe the version 8.10 is still supported, but I can tell you without mincing words that it's still supported, right? For the sake of this class, I'm going to be switching to roots so that I can perform some things with ease. So if I do sudo I, I'm root. If I do who am I, I'm root. If I want to also, so for Oracle, limited to Oracle, if I want to see the version 2 in an abridged form, I can do a cat etc/Oracle release, and it just gives me a line. Your Oracle Linux server release is 8.10 version. So you can go online and then check to actually see that this version is supported, right? Now, the next thing I want to check is what I talked about initially, which is your kernel. Now, your kernel is very important, right? You want to know whether the kernel of your operating system is actually the updated one. So if I do a simple uname-r, it gives me the kernel version of this Oracle Linux server. Now, let me explain before I show you something. Now, the 5.15.0 is the Linux version. Now, the -302.167.6 is the build version, right? Now, the EL8 is telling me that it is Enterprise Linux 8, right? Now, the UEK tells me that it's an unbreakable enterprise kernel, right? That your x86_64 tells you that it's running a 64-bit architecture. Now, if I do a simple check, just to show you, if I do a simple check, okay, maybe I'll share the link later, right? There is a link I'll share for Oracle that shows you the kernel version. And I wanted to show us live, right? The kernel version of this. Hold on, let me try sharing. See, there's a way to pull that up. if I show this, it's disrupting my share. Okay. Okay, maybe I'll share the link that shows that, right? So for your Oracle Linux version, right, I wanted to show you, it has like a trail of all the kernel version that Oracle Linux has put out, right? So you have your major version 5.15.0 and you have 302.16.30 So anything 30 is the latest build version of this kernel, rather. I think it was put out sometime September, October 2024, right? So this is the latest one. So it is important you also check this, right? As a tech risk practitioner, you want to be able to confirm whether the kernel version of the OS is actually the updated one. It is very important you run an updated kernel, as it has some bug fixes. There are some bug fixes that this particular build now has that the last build doesn't have. So it's important we actually check this. So online is to check. The next thing we want to check as IS auditors or tech risk practitioners is to look at the users, right? Please, are we together? Or am I still audible?
Yes,
okay, give me a word. All right, thank you. Okay. So typically, if you run a cat etc password, right? Now this system, what this shows you are the users that you have on your operating system, right? Now, if you see, so typically you have a regular user, like I said, a regular user will have user ID and group ID from 1000 below, and a system account will typically have from 1. So bean system, daemon system, LP system, sync system. So that is why the user IDs are usually 5, 4, within that range of 1 to 999. But for root accounts, which is the super user, right, the user ID is usually 0. So that's what we can use to identify. Now, if you're looking at users, I created some users here.
Sorry, no. So just for clarity, right? I'll need you to, if you can move some of the system users and the normal users to a Word document so that it's easier, is visible for participants to see, and then you can then interpret what each of the hundreds and all of that mean.
Okay.
I think that will help.
Okay.
I can already feel the pulse of some people who are not technical wondering what's this gibberish, but I'm positive that will help a lot of people.
Okay. All right. That works. Sorry, let me do this quickly. Okay. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So in these are regular users, right? Now, the first name here is the name of the user, which is Okuno. So Jennifer, Mike, Isaac, Kachi, and the rest. Now, the X you have here is a placeholder for the encrypted password, which is stored in a shadow file, which I'm still going to show us how that works, right? So this X here is just a placeholder for the encrypted part, because the encryption is very long, right? I'll show us an encrypted password of a user. Because it's very long, I think that's the reason, because if we put an encrypted password here, it's going to be really, really long, right? Now, your 1001, 1002, 1003 is the user ID. And by default, when you create a user, Linux OS will create a group for that particular user using the same ID. So you have your user ID 1001, you have your group ID 1001, and you have the directory, home directory /mic, and you have your bin bash. Now, what this bin bash means is this is the shell that has been attached to this particular user, right? And it means that when you see a bin bash, it means that this particular user can log on interactively their bash shell to this operating system. Now, you will see another instance of a user body who has the /no login. Now, what this /no login simply means is that this user cannot log on interactively into this operating system. However, there is a catch. However, the person's body's data still remains on this system. Now, let me go back and do something to show us an example, right? So I'm back to my box as root. If I try to sue means to switch user. If I'm trying to switch a user to body, for instance, what you will get is the account is currently not available, right? The account is currently not available. But if I check ID body still exists, right? Body still exists within your system, right? So you have instances of users, right? Users who have exited an institution. This is a test of control. Users have exited an institution, right? They have no need again to be profiled on this operating system. However, these users, right? What some people do is they just go and modify user mod -s/sb/ no login, for instance, and puts it on, let's say, catchy, right? So when they run that, what it does is, if you do a cat/etc/password, what it does is you will see that for catchy now, catchy has the no login, right? What it does is it just prevents him from logging in interactively, but his data still remain. If a user has exited my institution, why then do I need? So what we expect to see is a user delete rather, user del r that will be catchy, for instance, right? Now that deletes every information. If I do ID catchy, what I'll see is there's no such user, right? So the catch is this. So they put a /no login and tell you, yeah, the user can't log on interactively now. But all it takes is someone with a sudo right to go and modify. I can afford to modify the no login, get in as the user, perform something detrimental to the system, log out. On the logs, it will be captured as catchy that did it. But when the user leaves, what we expect to see is the data and everything concerning that user is deleted. Sorry, please, are we together? Did we catch that?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Now, for a system account, most system accounts, you already see the /no login. Yes, of course, a system account should not be able to perform any interactive logon. But on a regular user, our catch is to be able to see that, oh, you have users here, right? These users, typically, because this is a test, I use their name. On some environments or some organizations, you will see staff ID of staffs, and all that, right? But the catch is, if a user exits an organization, a user exits totally, the user should be deleted and there is no need for a /no login, except there is a justification as to why you're placing a no login. Maybe the data is running something on the back end or so, but such can be moved to another user, right? So we should be able to confirm that, oh, the users you have here are users who are still active people within the organization and not that they have exited within the organization. So another catch is to check the group, right? Let's look at the group. What group do you have? So if you run the cat etc group, right, you will see that there are various groups with various users attached to it. You have a main, or can also by virtue of creating the box, you have a wheel. This is what I was explaining, a wheel. Okay, before I explain this, let me run this too, so it will be easy to link. So cat etc sudoers gives you an information about the sudo configuration within your operating system, right? Now, like I said, based on specific distributions, they differ, right? For an Oracle, a Red Hat is a wheel. I think for an Ubuntu is a sudo or so. I can't really say for Ubuntu, but for Red Hat and Oracle, what you see is a wheel. So to be able to know the group which gives users that elevated privilege, you can come to your sudo as file, right? When you go to your sudo as file, you will see that it allows people in group wheel to run all commands. It gives you an idea that, oh, for you to be able to run all commands, you must be in the wheel group. Being in the wheel group allows you to run all commands everywhere within the operating system. You can run every command. Now, it says something here. Whenever you see the hash value, right? If you see the hash value, it means that it is commented out, right? It means that it is not active. The hash value means that it's not active. But there are exceptions to this, which we'll come to during the SSH. It means that it is not active. Now, if you look at this particular line, right? First, it says allows people in group wheel to run all commands. This percentage, everybody in wheel allowed to run all commands. Now we're saying same thing without the password, right? Now the catch here is this is uncommented, meaning it's active, and it has a part in it saying no password, meaning that as long as you are in the wheel group, I have added you to the wheel group, right? You have the sudo privilege to run all commands without a password. So we should be on the lookout for this part, right? We should always be on the lookout for this part. What it means is that this line is active and it's saying that no password for all users in the wheel group. So it's something that we should be on the lookout for. So if you go back to here, when I say wheel, so it means that, oh, this guy is actually a part of the wheel group. And by virtue of being in the wheel group, he's allowed to run a sudo command without the request for a password, which I did initially when I started. When I said the sudo who am I, it asked me for a password. It just told me I am root. Please, did we get the catch?
Yes, we get it, but also we are running out of time. Can you quickly show two other commands? What I can assure us is that what we will do is to put these commands in a table, give you an example of interpretations of these commands such that you can afford to use them in your organization, right? But also, please, just two more commands. We're already out of time. I wouldn't want to keep us here beyond. Wow, it's already 1 hour.
Okay, all right. So let me do this. So if I want to check ports that are open, very important, right? We're hosting web services, right? If you run an SS-TLN, it's going to give you for UDP unconnected, for TCPs, the ports that it is listening to. Now, if you look ahead, you see that I have a 23 that is open, right? It tells me that telnet service is actually opened on this particular OS, which we know that the risk with telnet is that it transfers data in plain text. Your data is not encrypted by any means. So it should not be a source of worry that, oh, we have port 23 open, meaning that I can afford to log on to this operating system, right, using port 23, telnet, put in my password, and log in. And if I'm connected via Wi-Fi, somebody can afford to use one of these solutions that can tap in and view and see my password in plain text. You can afford to see my password in plain text. So as auditors or as tech risk practitioners, we should also look out for, look at the ports, the IPs that are open. You have plain range of IPs here, 0.0.0, the colon 22, meaning that it's listening to any traffic, any IPv4 traffic, as long as it's coming through port 22, it is open. This too is open, and IPv6, telling you that it's listening to all IPv6 traffic, as long as it's coming in through port 22. So ports is something that we should also look out for. Now, if you look at, there are some organizations I visited that tells you that we don't want any user that is active, any user that has stayed, that has not logged in beyond or up to 90 days should be deactivated, right? They should be deactivated. So sometimes when we get into these organizations, it's part of the things we check, right? So we drop this command. It's going to tell you everybody, as long as you don't have a /no login, meaning that you can perform interactive logon. I can sit today and log on into this system, right? As long as you don't have a /no login at the end of your profile, which we saw on cat etc password, and you have never logged in for up to 90 days, it pops up here. So this tells me that these are active users on my operating system who have never logged in for 90 days, but are still active. It's a source of worry. At that point, I need to delete these users or block, give them a no interactive logon, put a /no login, right, on their profile. So one more before I call it close. So this is for a password quality. You want to look at the password quality of your users, right, on your operating system. So when you drop this, it tells you it's a system-wide configuration that gives you details of all the values expected, right? So if we're looking for passwords that has been set, you see that configuration for system-wide password quality limit. This is the default configuration. Now, if there is a need for me to tweak, I have to uncomment and maybe change this number of characters in the new password that must not be present in the old password. I can afford to change this to 2. Now, my minimum length is 8 because this is the default. So when we go for checks, we check this, right? So minimum acceptable size of the password. If your policy says 12, but here it's showing 8, it becomes a source of worry, right? You need to be able to edit this to reflect, what your organization has defined should be our password quality across all our systems, right? So there is a lot to share. There's a lot around NTP, firewall, password max time, shadow file. There's a lot to share, but what we can assure you is we'll create a comprehensive document that lists out the commands and the explanation of how to do that.
Can you please share for the EDR?
The EDR part, right?
Yes, can you quickly share that?
Okay, so if you want to check whether your organization has an antivirus
running
or an EDR running, right, you have to be able to list out all the files you have running. Now, so this gives you, I try to limit my search to services that are running, right? So you see you have a firewall, which is local to the host that is running. You have an Apache HTTP server. It is very important we also check the version of the web server you have installed, right? There could be, you could have a server that is running an outdated software. It becomes important that we check that. And you can quickly check that through HTTPD-v, which gives you the version of your Apache server, right? So if you have a DS agent, a Trend Micro installed, or any antivirus installed, it is going to be listed here. It is going to be listed here, right? You can see that I have Telnet installed here on this particular server, which shouldn't be, right? I have a telnet installed. I've seen organizations that have some network monitoring tools installed by virtue of someone having sudo privilege. He was able to install anything, right? So this becomes an important thing. On your Windows system, you can also just easily go to programs, look at all the services you have, or all the applications you've installed. Do you have an antivirus? Do you have this? Do you have that? No. But this also becomes it's very crucial to your operation. You should be able to check, to show you here, oh, you have a DS agent description, trend micro, you have a crowd force, blah, blah, and to have it here. So all these services, your governance document, you should be able to list out the services that are required to be running. That is why the governance document is the beginning point. You have to put out the process. You have to put out what are the approved applications we want to see running, aside from the system daemons that you have running, right, by virtue of spinning up this OS. You also need to define what are the approved ones. So you don't have people just installing anything they want to make their job easy at the expense of the organization. So these are some of the things we need to do. I wish we had time. I would have loved to show us, other things around SSH config and all that, but we're going to build up, like I said, a comprehensive checklist that details everything so that it will be easy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, can we take 2 questions? So if you have any questions, maybe you want to show with a raised hand, right? And then we allow you speak. We can just take 2. The recording will be available on the YouTube channel. Hopefully in under 3-4 days, we should have that hosted for us to go through. And except on popular demand, we request that in April, we revisit this and take the part 2 where we'll just be running the commands, because that could be another approach. It's 1 hour is quite short, right? So what's it going to be? Well, let's take questions first. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. You can unmute yourself if you want to speak, or just indicate with a raised hand. I'll call you, and then you ask. Okay, I don't see any. Okay, there's a question here, and also it says if someone has access to sudo account, I don't think the person would want to change the login when. Okay, I think it's just a statement he's making. All right, Thelma, please go ahead. Then Akim. Thelma, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or rather, good morning. So my question is around the password policy. When you have a default account, right, the normal thing would be for you to change the password, but for default password, can we still leave them and just create other profiles for users on the database or server application? I don't know if you get my question.
Yeah, so typically you want to change your default passwords, right? Because they are usually known passwords that is known to general public, right? So you want to change that as soon as you onboard the system. It's not what you want to keep. It's a low-hanging fruit for an attacker, right? Okay, Akim.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, tech assurance teams. My question is a simple one. You spoke about the login and the no login. So I'm looking at an organization where existing tab are not deleted, even on their Active Directory. What they do is to disable it. If you go into such an environment and you see it set to no login, the batch set to no login, Is this still taken as an exception? I know the best practice will be to say I delete the user, but if the organization's strategy is to say all exit desktop are disabled, what will you recommend for such? Thank you.
Okay. Now, so we want to take that. He's asking for a compensating control in the event that your policy as an organization is saying you can't delete, right? And you want to maintain, say, for record purposes. What then becomes your compensating control?
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Hakeem. So if the organization has decided within them that, oh, okay, fine, for every user that leaves, let's not delete those users, let's have those users there. The organization has accepted the risk, right? They've accepted the risk that, oh, these users should not be deleted. However, what we can do is, like I rightly said, you can put the no login, right, at that part of those users, right? That will now prevent interactive logon from those particular users that the organization has said, oh, let's not disable. There is also another command I'm trying to find out that can put a hold on a user, right, such that the user can never log on until the organization now puts a hold to, okay, now puts a say that, okay, fine, we want this particular users to log on. So it's something I can get to and also share the group. But for now, we can put the no login on those particular users since the organization says, oh, fine, we don't want to delete, but we don't want to delete those users. So there's another command that can do that. I'll check for that and get to you. Yeah.
Hey, I have 3 more hands. Let's take Ozioma. We're running out of time, guys.
Okay, good day, Nonso. Good day, Tony. We like you rightly said, you identified one key concern for organizations in managing security to be lack of governance or poor governance. Is very commonly seen where you have a lot of inconsistencies across server setup. I'm just thinking on top of my head, how can auditors like us or security professionals be on the tab monitoring these issues? For instance, if we have decided that we are going to set up our hardening standards and a server is put on the network, or there has been a maintenance done on the server, in the process, they alter some of these standards such that it can alert us. Can you think of a solution, or can we leverage on maybe the configuration management system or the CrowdStrike? What can we do to be able to keep our tab on this issue?
Okay. So we want to take that.
Okay, so she's asking
What
from this.
What is saying is
Okay.
that in the event that there are changes to the already set configuration, how do I know as a security professional that changes have occurred on this server? Some of the configurations that were there ab initio have now changed to something else, either due to a maintenance or whatever. How will the security personnel know? How will an auditor proactively have that information?
Correct. Okay. So like during my explanation, right, I talked about a FIM, right, a file integrity monitoring solution, right? Now, the way the Linux operating system architecture is such that is a 3 hierarchy, like a filing system, right? Now, for every file that you have defined as sensitive, I know an organization that for every file they defined as sensitive, they onboard it on a FIM solution, a file integrity monitoring solution. Now, what it does is it is used to detect unauthorized changes or alteration to those files or system configurations. That is what it does. So I know someone was telling me that it goes advanced as even locking down those files such that if you do not have the permission, you can't even alter those files. So a theme solution, there are various security solutions. You can use a SIEM if you want to detect, because it pipes the log to somewhere else you can fetch. But if you want to be able to detect on the go, a file integrity monitoring solution should be able to do that for you. And an antivirus or an EDR might not have the capacity to do that, but a theme, right, would be able to actually do that. It alerts you, it takes action when certain files or directories, which are crucial in a Linux operating system, right? So that's what it does. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey.
And I believe it's as good as how fine-grained you set the rules.
Correct. The parameters, how far you set them. Yeah.
Yeah. What file path you're monitoring, right? That's also determines, because if you're monitoring a wrong file path and the activities or the changes are made somewhere else, then that becomes a blind spot. In addition to what Nonso said, then you also have your SIEM where that is analyzing some of the logs that you're pushing to it, for instance, to help you also detect activities that are taking place on the operating system. Agedo, can we take you?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everybody.
Light and success. That's the most that we'll be able to do. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you for this wonderful session. I want to ask, beyond the being able to call back log details, activities of the user, would there be any reason why anyone want to keep an exited user still in the system? Maybe like you now push it to what's it called, disable instead of deleting. Then again, I also want to ask, if the user is finally deleted and there's room to check what this person has done over time, is there any way you can actually call back this log and go through? Thank you.
Okay, now so you want to respond to that? I didn't quite get his first question, but please go ahead if you heard him.
Okay, so you're asking around, if I get you properly, right, why you would want to keep a user, right, on a Linux box even after the user has exited, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that what?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So for that question, right, I'm going to answer it in two ways, right? In practical sense, right, based on my reviews of institutions, right, nobody has been able to give me any valid reason why you would have a staff or exited staff access still being left active on the system. Because whatever, if the user's account is running maybe a cron job backend, right, it is something that we can migrate to a system account, and a system account will now be responsible for that cron job that runs on that operating system, right? So nobody has been able to give me, that's from my experience, nobody has been able to give me a vital reason why you should have a user. Most times it's usually because they forget and there's no central system to manage user access, right? That is what happens. But on the second way, right, you can have a user retained basically for, let's say the user account is running a cron job, or there's a background process that user account is using, is running, right? But from the audit point or from the tech risk point, it shouldn't be so, right? Migrate it to a system account, use the system account to run the cron job, and take off the user that has left the system. So that's usually my advice. Then the second question, I didn't get what the second question was saying.
Okay, can we quickly take light, then success?
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Michael, actually, not like just using someone's system. No, so well done. You have done quite a thorough job. However, I just want to throw light on some points as regard exited staff. I think the method the best method for me is expiring that user account, right? Then if the mode of authentication is password-based, is to change the password. But if the mode of authentication is SSH key-based authentication, is to delete the public key in the user profile. Then the no login for the batch shell will then be a very good option. So I just say I should add that to your recommendations. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks. Like that was what I was
Thank
trying to recall for expiring, right? When Akim was asking, yes, expiring is something you can do. Then for keys, yes, you're right, right? But because we didn't venture into SSH today, that's why I didn't talk about keys. But yes, you're right. Thank you for the addition. Thank you.
Thanks. And finally, success.
Okay,
Short.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'll just box the two questions into one. So my first question is, when you run your SSTLN command, right, what specific feature do you check to know the opening listening port? Then secondly, how efficient is using LDAP server in managing user profiles, that's user authentication to your Linux operating system? Because we've seen environments where they centrally use that to manage user authentication instead of creating them locally on the operating system.
Okay, success. Thank you. So for SSTLN, right? So when you run that particular command, it shows you the ports that's being listened to and the IP address, right? That is being listened to. That's if you're able to set the specific, right? However, if let's say for the 23 instance, for the telnet that I had open, right? So after you've seen that, oh yes, 23, port 23 is open, you can further do a system CTL status for telnet.socket to actually check if that particular service is running, right? It is going to give you a detail whether that service is running. Now, if you have a firewall daemon that is also configured, right, on your operating system, by default, it comes. You can also go as far as checking the firewall to see if Telnet 2 has been allowed as part of the services on the firewall, because that's also very important, right? Now, for the issue of LDAP, right, it is something that it is very efficient, especially in larger environments where user authentication, centralized management of user authentication becomes very necessary. So LDAP makes it a standardized way, right, to be able to secure and retrieve this directory information. So for me, I think LDAP 2 is a very good way of managing user access. It's an efficient way of managing user access on Linux boxes.
Okay, so let me say thank you very much, guys, for your time. Thank you very much, Nonso. Hopefully we'll be able to get you back for, say, the concluding part. But part of what we'll do is that, like I said earlier, we will share these materials with us on the WhatsApp group. I have dropped the link for some of us who may be joining us for the first time. And really, it's a whole lot to unpack. It's a whole lot to unpack under 1 hour. We've already exceeded that. We're almost doing 90 minutes and we have to go. For those of us just joining us, this is the Tech Assurance and Advisory Community. We are a community of over 1,000 tech practitioners in various stages of our careers. Our core objective is to support each other grow our careers, and we have been able to achieve this through sessions like this where we share knowledge, we do mentorship, we also share job opportunities, and then we support each other on the job. So if you're stuck on a task, you can drop a message and someone picks it up and responds. So again, if this is a community you think you can contribute positively towards, we will be glad to have you join us. The materials will be shared on the community WhatsApp group, and the videos will be uploaded on YouTube by next week, right? Thank you very much for joining, and let's all have a fantastic weekend. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.